We've been taught that more is better. More success, more knowledge, more hustle, more growth. But here's a question most people don't ask until they feel overwhelmed. What if the peace you're looking for isn't found in more, but in less? Less noise, less striving, less attachment to things that no longer nourish your soul. The Stoics understood this long before the modern world got loud. They didn't chase more. They practiced the quiet art of subtraction, and they found that what remains after you strip away the unnecessary is not emptiness, but clarity. Marcus Aurelius, in the solitude of his meditations, wrote not about gaining power, but about removing illusions. Seneca didn't tell us to fill our calendars. He urged us to simplify our lives so we could hear ourselves think, feel, and live deliberately. Epictetus reminded us that freedom begins not with the world changing, but with us no longer being chained to what we cannot control. And maybe that's why life feels heavy sometimes, because we're carrying things that were never truly ours to begin with. The expectations of others, the pressure to prove, the mental clutter of comparison, overthinking, or unresolved emotions. Stoicism doesn't offer shortcuts. It offers space, space to pause, to look inward, to ask yourself, what have I silently tolerated that now weighs me down? In this video, we're not here to add more strategies, hacks, or habits. We're here to take something away, quietly, intentionally, without drama, without posting about it or needing applause. We're going to walk through 10 silent eliminations, 10 things you can begin to release one by one, not to impress anyone, not to fix yourself, but to return to who you truly are beneath the noise. Some of these might seem simple, but don't mistake quiet for weak. The deepest transformation often begins in silence, like a tree letting go of dead leaves, effortless yet essential. So if you've been feeling scattered, if your inner peace feels distant, if a part of you knows something needs to change, but you're not sure where to begin, start here, not by doing more, but by letting go. By the end of this video, you might not have more answers, but you will have fewer distractions, fewer things stealing your energy, fewer invisible weights on your back, because real peace isn't something you add. It's something you uncover when you dare to subtract. Let's begin one. Over-apologizing. Let go of the habit that shrinks you. Let me ask you something gentle but real. How many times today have you said I'm sorry, not because you hurt someone, but simply because you existed? You were 5 minutes late to a meeting. Sorry. You asked a question. Sorry. You spoke up, took space, corrected a mistake, or simply needed something, and out came that automatic, I'm sorry. Now don't get me wrong, a sincere apology, when offered for real harm, is an act of strength. It reflects emotional maturity and respect. But when everything becomes a reason to apologize, something deeper is at play. Something subtle but powerful is being eroded inside us. Over-apologizing doesn't just dilute the word sorry, it dilutes your sense of self. Stoic wisdom teaches us to be honest in our speech and measured in our reactions. That includes the language we use about ourselves. Marcus Aurelius said, "If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it." So if you didn't truly do wrong, why keep saying you did? For many of us, this habit comes from a familiar place: guilt, fear of conflict, or a lifetime of people-pleasing. Somewhere along the way, we were conditioned to believe that taking up space, emotionally, mentally, physically, was an inconvenience. So we softened ourselves. We used sorry as a social cushion, a way to preempt judgment or avoid disapproval. But here's the thing. You're allowed to take up space. You're allowed to ask questions, make mistakes, be imperfect, speak slowly, show up late once in a while. You don't need to apologize for being human. So what do you do instead? You shift your language, not just to sound different, but to feel different. Instead of saying, sorry I'm late, try thank you for waiting. Instead of sorry I asked, say, I appreciate your insight. Instead of shrinking with guilt, you anchor in clarity and gratitude. It may sound small, but language is energy. And the way we speak about ourselves shapes how others experience us and how we experience ourselves. This is not about becoming cold or overly assertive. It's about being rooted, being conscious, choosing your words not out of fear, but out of presence. Let me offer you a quiet, stoic practice. Next time you're about to say sorry, pause. Ask yourself, did I truly harm someone? If the answer is yes, own it with heart. But if the answer is no, if it's just your old reflex trying to make you disappear, breathe instead. Choose a new response, a grateful one, a clear one, a grounded one. Over time, this shift creates a subtle but powerful transformation. You stop bending out of shape to fit spaces you were never meant to shrink into. You stop apologizing for your existence, and you start walking through the world with quiet dignity. Remember, your presence isn't a burden, your voice isn't a disruption, and your truth doesn't require an apology. So the next time I'm sorry rises on your lips, consider this instead. What if I don't apologize for who I am? What if I just stand here as I am and let that be enough? Because it is. You are. Let's move on to the next silent weight, one we carry not in our words but in our thoughts. 2. Defending every choice. Free yourself from the need to explain. Have you ever caught yourself explaining everything? Why you said no to an invitation, why you're eating a certain way, why you left that job, why you changed your mind, why you're simply choosing to live differently. It might sound harmless, just clarifying your intentions, being polite, but beneath that habit often lies something quieter and heavier, the belief that we need permission to live our truth. The Stoics would tell us, you don't owe your soul to the opinions of others. Yet so many of us walk through life seeking invisible approval. We explain not because others need to understand, but because we feel unsafe if they don't. We fear judgment, disconnection, or being misunderstood, so we overcompensate with justification. But here's a radical thought. What if not every choice requires an explanation? What if your no could simply be no? What if your decision didn't need to be dressed up in reasons to make it more acceptable to others? When you constantly defend your choices, it signals to the world and to yourself that you doubt them, that you're unsure, that you need your truth to be validated externally. But the truth is, confidence isn't loud. It's quiet, grounded, firm. It doesn't always need to explain itself because it knows where it stands. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it." That's the Stoic compass, alignment between your actions and your values, not alignment with public opinion. Think of it like this. Your life is a sacred garden. Your time, your energy, your choices, they're the soil, the roots, the fruit. Not everyone gets to walk through it. Not everyone deserves to question the way you're tending to it. And not everyone needs to understand your path in order for it to be valid. Of course, there will be moments where clarification brings connection, where explaining something deepens trust or brings people closer. But that's not the same as defending. One comes from love, the other from fear. So how do we let go of the need to justify? Start by noticing the impulse. When you make a decision, can you sit with the discomfort of not explaining? Can you trust that your yes or no is enough? Next, build a small practice. Whenever you feel the urge to explain a personal choice, ask yourself, would I still make this decision if no one ever approved of it? If the answer is yes, then stand by it, silently, peacefully, powerfully. This practice doesn't make you cold, it makes you clear. It helps you reclaim your energy from conversations that never needed to happen in the first place. It reminds you that your inner alignment is more important than external applause. Let me leave you with this image. A mountain doesn't defend its shape. A tree doesn't explain why it bends toward the light. And you, when rooted in your truth, don't need to justify the direction you're growing. Sometimes the most powerful statement is your quiet presence, unshaken, unapologetic, unexplained. Let this be the season where you stop defending every choice and start trusting the quiet strength of simply living it. And now, let's look at the next weight you're carrying, one that might be wearing you down without you even noticing. 3. Tolerating disrespect. Teach the world how to treat you. Let's talk about a quiet but powerful truth. What you tolerate becomes your standard. In life, you're not only teaching others how to love you, you're teaching them how to treat you. Not through your words, but through what you allow, through what you let slide, through the silences you keep when you should have drawn a line. You may think you're being kind by not speaking up, that you're being the bigger person by staying silent when someone crosses a boundary. But kindness without limits becomes self-abandonment, and silence, when rooted in fear or guilt, slowly teaches others that your peace is optional. The Stoics remind us you cannot control how others behave, but you can control what you accept. And here's the thing, disrespect doesn't always come wrapped in shouting or insults. Sometimes it's subtle, a dismissive tone, a pattern of lateness, a constant interruption, a joke at your expense. Small moments that, over time, chip away at your dignity. If you absorb it quietly, if you smile through it, if you make excuses for them, you're unintentionally training the world to believe that this is okay. And worse, you may start to believe it too. But here's a different path, a Stoic path. You don't need to explode. You don't need to justify your boundaries with long explanations. You simply need to own your worth and act from it. Seneca once wrote, "You act like mortals in all that you fear, and like immortals in all that you desire." In other words, we often fear confrontation as if it will destroy us. But in truth, the real erosion happens when we constantly compromise who we are to keep the peace. Let me offer you a shift. You don't need to be loud to be strong. Quiet boundaries can be firm. Gentle lines can be clear. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is, "I don't accept that," without anger, without drama, just certainty. A friend once told me, energy is expensive, and you get to decide what's worth spending it on. That stuck with me, because every time we tolerate disrespect, we spend energy cleaning up the internal mess it leaves behind, second-guessing ourselves, resenting the moment, replaying the scene. But when we quietly honor our own dignity, we stop those leaks. We protect the core of who we are, and we send a silent signal to the world. I am not available for less than respect. This isn't about ego. It's about energetic hygiene. It's about preserving the strength of your inner world so you can move through life with calm, focus, and presence. So here's a question to gently sit with. Where in your life have you been tolerating what quietly drains you? And more importantly, what would it look like to release it, not with force, but with clarity? You don't need to announce your boundaries to the world. You just need to live them. Let your choices speak louder than your explanations. Let your absence from disrespectful spaces be your message, because your peace is sacred, and the more you protect it, the more powerful and peaceful you become. Coming up next, we'll explore another quiet habit that weighs you down, the urge to explain your past. But what if your healing doesn't need an audience? Let's talk about that next. 4. Clinging to old versions of yourself. Letting go to grow. Here's a quiet truth that's often hard to face. Sometimes the person holding you back is the person you used to be. We all carry old versions of ourselves, identities we once wore proudly, roles we used to play, dreams that defined us, mistakes that shaped us. And while some of those identities helped us survive or succeed, they weren't meant to last forever. But we cling anyway, to the achiever we once were, to the people pleaser we learned to become, to the rebel, the fixer, the overcomer. We hold on because it feels familiar, safe, predictable. Yet here's the paradox. The more we grip the old version of who we were, the more we delay becoming who we're meant to be. The Stoics understood this. They believed that life is constant movement, a river, not a sculpture. To grow is to allow yourself to change without shame. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Look within. Within is the fountain of good, and it will ever bubble up if you will ever dig." But what clogs the fountain? Our attachment to outdated identities. Think of it like emotional clutter, a trophy shelf of old roles and definitions that no longer serve you. Maybe it's the strong one who never asked for help, or the high achiever whose worth depended on being the best, or the failure you secretly believe you'll always be because of one decision long ago. You don't need to announce your reinvention to the world. You don't need a dramatic life overhaul. What you need is quiet evolution, small, steady steps where your current values lead the way, not your past fears. Tiny moments of honesty where you say, that version of me did their job, but I've outgrown them now. It's not betrayal to let go. It's liberation. Here's something I want you to ask yourself, gently, without judgment. What part of you are you still performing just because it's familiar? What role are you afraid to release, even though it no longer feels true? Sometimes the hardest prison to escape is the one you built for your own safety. But healing doesn't always look like a loud breakthrough. Sometimes it's a quiet moment when you finally exhale and say, I'm allowed to change. And you are. You're allowed to be softer now. You're allowed to move slower, think differently, value peace over productivity. You're allowed to want something new, not because you're broken, but because you've evolved. There's strength in shedding what no longer fits. There's wisdom in becoming less defined by what you've done and more anchored in who you're becoming. So as you move forward, consider this. You don't need to prove anything to your past self. You only need to honor your present one. And that doesn't require a speech, just quiet choices, clear values, a willingness to grow without apology. In the next section, we'll explore another silent weight that quietly drains your emotional energy, the need to over-explain your healing. What if your peace doesn't require an audience? Let's talk about that next. 5. Performing for validation. Return to being, not appearing. There's a kind of tired that no amount of rest can fix. It's the exhaustion of constantly performing, of shaping your words, your smile, your life, just to be liked, approved, or applauded. You show up not as yourself, but as a curated version of who you think others want you to be. Maybe you felt this, the need to post the perfect moment, to say the right thing, to succeed not because it fulfills you, but because someone might clap. And over time, this performance becomes automatic. You smile on cue. You explain more than you need. You hide your struggles so you seem strong. You work harder than necessary because part of you is still trying to prove something. But validation is a hungry ghost. The more you feed it, the more it demands. And worst of all, it never nourishes. It distracts. It inflates ego, but depletes the soul. The Stoics warned us about this. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "It never ceases to amaze me. We all love ourselves more than other people, but care more about their opinion than our own." Isn't that wild? We chase attention from people who don't even know our truth. We contort ourselves to fit into spaces we don't even belong. And for what? A fleeting moment of approval that fades just as quickly. Here's the turning point. You don't need to be seen to be real. You don't need to impress to have worth. And you don't have to perform to earn love or peace. Real presence, the kind that calms rooms, builds trust, and carries quiet power, comes not from being noticed, but from being aligned. When your actions match your values. When you speak because it matters, not because it wins likes. When you rest, not because you're lazy, but because your soul is worthy of care. So ask yourself gently, what part of your life feels like a stage? Where have you been performing more than living? And what would it feel like to just be without the audience? Sometimes healing is unlearning the applause. It's stepping off the stage. It's walking away from the pressure to impress and returning to the stillness of your own truth. You don't need to dim yourself, but you also don't need to shine for anyone else. Let your light be honest, not choreographed. Let your presence be whole, not curated. Let your worth be felt, not displayed. Because the deepest validation you'll ever feel isn't loud. It's the quiet confidence of knowing you're enough, without performance, without permission, without a show. And in the next part of this journey, we'll explore the hidden cost of overexposure. Why sharing too much too soon can quietly erode your peace. Let's talk about that next. 6. Constant notifications. Reclaiming your inner silence. Have you noticed how often your attention is stolen? A soft buzz, a red dot, a chime that breaks your train of thought. It may seem harmless at first, a quick glance, a moment of curiosity. But over time, these tiny interruptions create something much bigger. Fragmentation. Your mind becomes splintered, always half here, half there. Always responding, but rarely reflecting. In a world that keeps screaming for your attention, stillness becomes a radical act. Stoicism teaches us the value of depth, of undistracted thought and deliberate presence. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You must reclaim the ability to see things as they truly are." But how can we see clearly, think deeply, or even feel fully when we're constantly pulled in 100 directions by our devices? Let's be honest. Modern life is noisy. We carry the noise in our pockets. Notifications, updates, messages, all designed to trigger urgency, not clarity. But urgency doesn't always mean importance, and accessibility doesn't equal connection. Just because someone can reach you instantly doesn't mean they should. And just because the world is moving fast doesn't mean your mind has to. This isn't about hating technology. It's about creating space within it. When you silence your phone, you begin to hear yourself again. When you turn off unnecessary alerts, you give your mind the room to wander, to wonder, to actually rest. And that's not laziness. That's clarity. That's sovereignty. Let me ask you something. When was the last time you had a full hour without checking your phone? Not scrolling, not replying, not reacting, just being. Most people can't even remember, but it's in those quiet stretches that deep work happens, emotional processing happens, real insight emerges. Not the surface level thought that's interrupted every 5 minutes, but the kind of reflection that reshapes your life. The truth is, constant notifications teach your brain to crave interruption. You lose your tolerance for stillness. You become anxious in silence. You forget what it feels like to focus. But focus is power, and protecting your focus is one of the highest forms of self-respect. Here's a quiet practice that can change your life. Each day, choose 1 hour, just one, where all your devices are off, not on silent, not on do not disturb, completely off. Use that time to read, to journal, to think, to walk, or to do absolutely nothing. Let your mind breathe. The first few times you may feel restless. That's okay. That restlessness is withdrawal from digital dependency. Let it pass. And soon in that silence, something beautiful will return. Your full attention. And that attention, it's the birthplace of presence, of peace, of creativity, and confidence. Epictetus taught that we are disturbed not by events, but by our judgments about them. But when we're constantly distracted, we don't even notice our judgments. We live in reaction, not reflection. So protect your thought space like sacred ground, because it is. Silence isn't emptiness, it's strength. Stillness isn't wasted time, it's wisdom being born. In the next part of this journey, we'll explore another subtle form of noise, oversharing. Why sometimes saying less can actually protect your peace more. Let's explore that next. 7. Over-explaining yourself. Letting clarity speak for you. Have you ever walked away from a conversation, replaying it over and over in your mind, thinking, maybe I should have said it differently, maybe I should have explained more so they wouldn't misunderstand? That impulse to over-explain is often disguised as being thorough, considerate, or clear. But if we look deeper, it's not always about communication. Sometimes it's about fear, fear of being judged, fear of being misinterpreted, fear of not being liked. We think if we say enough, if we clarify every angle, if we cover every possibility, then maybe we'll finally be understood. But the truth is, the need to be perfectly understood is a trap. It's not clarity, it's emotional labor disguised as control. Over-explaining drains your peace. It places your sense of calm in the hands of someone else's interpretation. And no matter how carefully you explain yourself, people will still see you through the lens of their experience, not yours. Epictetus reminds us, don't explain your philosophy, embody it. In other words, let your life speak. Let your actions reflect your values. Let your boundaries communicate your self-respect. Let your presence be the message. You don't need to defend your choices to everyone. You don't need to justify your boundaries. Not every why deserves an answer, and not everyone deserves full access to your internal world. There's a certain quiet strength in simply saying, this is what I choose, and letting it rest there. No long disclaimers, no emotional disclaimers, no dance for approval, because the more solid you become within yourself, the less explaining you need to do. In fact, the habit of over-explaining is often born from past patterns, moments when you felt misunderstood or dismissed or required to prove your worth, but you're not there anymore. You've grown. You've earned your peace. So here's a gentle shift. Next time you feel the urge to over-explain, pause. Ask yourself, am I speaking from confidence or from fear? Do I trust that my clarity is enough, even if it's not fully received? Often the most grounded people are not the ones who speak the most, but the ones who speak the least, yet live with the greatest congruence. Their life does the explaining. Their boundaries set the tone. Let that be you. In a noisy world that demands constant explanation, permission, and performance, choose to simplify. Choose to say less and mean more. Choose to conserve your energy for the few who actually listen. Because at the end of the day, you don't need everyone to understand you. You just need to understand yourself. In the next part, we'll explore another subtle shift. How the habit of consuming everyone's opinion can quietly distort your own clarity. Let's talk about that next. 8. Waiting for perfect timing. Letting go of the illusion of ready. Have you ever found yourself saying, "I'll start when the time is right," or "I just need to be more prepared"? Maybe it's a creative project you've been holding close to your chest. Maybe it's a conversation you know you need to have, or a change you deeply want, but keep postponing, waiting for some inner green light to appear. Here's a quiet truth we rarely talk about. Perfect timing is an illusion. It doesn't arrive like a sign from the sky. It doesn't knock politely. It's something we manufacture to protect ourselves from one thing: fear. Fear of failing, fear of looking foolish, fear of discomfort, and sometimes even fear of success. Perfectionism wears many masks, but one of its sneakiest disguises is planning. We tell ourselves we're being thoughtful, cautious, strategic, but beneath all that waiting is resistance. The Stoics saw this clearly. Epictetus said, "How long are you going to wait before you demand the best for yourself?" In other words, when will you stop stalling and start stepping? Life doesn't reward delay. It rewards clarity. It rewards movement. It rewards those who show up imperfectly but consistently. And if you've ever been stuck in the cycle of waiting, waiting to be more confident, waiting to have more time, waiting for external permission, this is your gentle reminder. Start where you are. Start with what you have. Start with trembling hands if you must. Because progress doesn't live in perfection. It lives in momentum. Imagine a seed. It doesn't wait for the perfect weather. It roots into the soil. It cracks open in the dark. It grows, awkwardly, quietly, messily. But it grows, and so do we. The more we delay, the heavier our dreams become. Ideas begin to rot under the weight of someday, and we start believing we're not capable, not because we're not ready, but because we never gave ourselves permission to begin. Here's the Stoic shift. Stop asking, "Am I ready?" Start asking, "What's the next small step I can take with courage today?" Let go of the myth that the stars must align, that the conditions must be perfect, that you must be perfect. The only real right time is the moment you choose to commit, to show up, to act, even if your voice shakes, even if your plan is messy, even if your heart isn't fully convinced yet. Because the truth is, clarity doesn't precede action. It often follows it. So today, try this. Replace overthinking with one brave movement. Replace waiting with doing. Replace the illusion of readiness with the strength of willingness. And notice what shifts, not outside you, but within. In the next part, we'll explore another subtle yet powerful thing to release: the constant consumption of information. Because sometimes the noise outside is just a mirror of the uncertainty we carry inside. Let's go deeper. 9. Seeking closure from others, freeing yourself from the need to be understood. Let me ask you something gentle but real. Have you ever waited for someone to explain why they hurt you? Waited for that final conversation, the one where they finally get it, finally apologize, finally give you the closure you deserve? It's a quiet longing many of us carry. We want the story to make sense. We want the ending to feel clean. We want to know why. But here's the truth that's both liberating and a little uncomfortable. Closure doesn't come from them, it comes from you. And that's not a poetic idea, it's a practice of emotional maturity. The Stoics taught that peace isn't something others hand to us. It's something we cultivate by how we interpret and respond to events, not by waiting on someone else's explanation to heal our hearts. When we hang our healing on someone else's words, we stay tethered to their timeline. We stay stuck in emotional limbo, hoping they'll one day understand. But some people will never understand, and some don't even try. So what do? We stop looking outside and start asking inward. What part of me is still clinging to their validation? What do I need to say to myself to feel complete? Closure isn't a final word from them. It's a final decision from you. A choice to stop opening the same emotional door, hoping the ending will change. A choice to release, even without resolution. Maybe they never apologized. Maybe they left without answers. Maybe they still don't think they did anything wrong. But none of that can stop your peace unless you give it that power. Letting go doesn't mean pretending it didn't hurt. It means recognizing that your healing doesn't require their permission. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is nothing at all. Not because you don't care, but because you've outgrown the need to be understood by someone who couldn't see you clearly in the first place. There's a quiet freedom that comes when you stop trying to untangle someone else's confusion. When you realize you don't need their closure, you need your clarity. So write your own ending. Say what you needed to hear to yourself. Bless it, release it, and let it drift quietly out of your nervous system. And as you do, you'll find something better than closure. You'll find peace. Not loud, not dramatic, just steady, silent, real. And in the next section, we'll talk about another subtle but heavy habit, the endless cycle of consuming information. Because even growth, when done compulsively, can become another form of avoidance. Let's go deeper. 10. Arguing to win, letting go of the need to be right. Here's a subtle trap that many fall into, even the most well-meaning among us. The desire to win every argument, to be right, to prove a point, to have the last word. Sometimes it's not even about the truth. It's about the ego's hunger to be seen as smarter, stronger, more dominant. And in those moments, the conversation turns into a battleground, not a bridge. But let's step back and ask, what's the real cost of needing to win? It drains your energy, it distances your relationships, and most importantly, it disturbs your inner peace. The Stoics remind us, you always lose something when you argue from ego, because even when you win the debate, you may lose your presence, your calm, your connection, and that's too high a price for a temporary sense of superiority. Seneca once said, "A quarrel is quickly settled when deserted by one party. There is no battle unless there be two." This isn't about letting people walk all over you. It's about knowing when a conversation is no longer a path to understanding, but a loop of noise. So the next time you're pulled into the urge to correct someone, ask yourself, is this really worth it? Do I need to prove anything? Or can I simply stand in truth without resistance? Wisdom doesn't argue to overpower, it listens to understand. And if the conversation starts spiraling into personal attacks or defensive spirals, the wise choice isn't escalation, it's stillness. It's walking away, not because you're weak, but because you've learned that inner peace is more powerful than outward dominance. It takes courage to let go of being right. It takes strength to be misunderstood without fighting back. And it takes self-respect to protect your energy, even when your pride wants to take over. When you no longer need to win, you've already won something deeper: your clarity, your calm, your control. So let others raise their voice if they must. Let them try to dominate the space with noise. You, you choose silence that speaks volumes. You choose presence over performance. You choose peace over proving. Because in the end, the most powerful response is often no response at all. And now, as we wrap up this series of silent eliminations, let's reflect on the deeper transformation that happens, not when we add more, but when we learn to let go. Stay with me for the final message. The quiet path to self-mastery. Here's something most people never realize. True transformation doesn't always make noise. It doesn't need a stage, an audience, or a round of applause. In fact, the deepest kind of growth happens in silence. The moments when you quietly release what no longer serves you. The choices you make when no one is watching. The invisible boundaries you draw, not to push people away, but to protect your peace. Stoicism teaches us this subtle but radical truth, that becoming whole is not about adding more. It's about removing what weighs you down. We live in a culture obsessed with accumulation, more achievements, more validation, more hustle. But the Stoic path walks in the opposite direction. It asks, what can you live without? What can you let go of to return to yourself? The strength you're looking for? It's not in how much you carry. It's in how lightly you can walk through life. You don't need to declare your healing to the world. You don't need to explain your peace. You don't need to justify your clarity. Simply become lighter, silently, steadily, without performance. When Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it," he was pointing to a deeper form of discipline, one that doesn't seek recognition, but alignment. This is not a journey of becoming someone new. It's a quiet return to who you've always been underneath the noise. So take this to heart. You don't have to argue to be wise. You don't have to explain to be clear. You don't have to fight to be strong. Let your presence do the talking. Let your actions be your answer. Let your silence carry your power. Because every time you subtract what drains you, be it a thought, a habit, a need to prove, you reclaim a little more of your inner stillness. And from that stillness, your strength quietly grows. So don't rush to fill the space. Don't fear the quiet. Let it guide you back. As Epictetus once said, freedom is the only worthy goal in life. It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control. And that begins with one quiet elimination at a time. So as you go back to your life, ask yourself not, what should I add? But rather, what can I gently release today? If this message spoke to you, take a deep breath. Let it settle. And when you're ready to go deeper, subscribe now to Stoic Journey Moments for weekly reflections, timeless wisdom, and quiet guidance to keep you calm in a chaotic world. We're not chasing more, we're becoming less, and in that less, we become whole.